Okay, let's dive into this. Did you know that the average consumer is exposed to thousands of brand messages every single day? But, we only actually remember a tiny fraction of them. Why is that? Why does all that marketing noise just completely bounce off our brains? Well, it's usually because most campaigns totally fail at the absolute foundation of strategic architecture. So, welcome to today's Explainer. We're skipping the basic definitions today and getting right into the actual mechanics of corporate positioning. If you've ever wondered how top-tier strategists basically engineer market dominance, or why you instinctively grab one product over a seemingly identical competitor, you're absolutely in the right place. We are going to decode those invisible, highly calculated forces at play.
So I want you to ask yourself, how do brands actually influence your perception? It's a question we just kind of take for granted, right? But it's fascinating because neurological studies show that the human brain takes less than half a second to process a brand's logo and trigger an emotional reaction. I mean, literally faster than the blink of an eye. And let me tell you, that instantaneous reaction, it is definitely not magic, and it's for sure not an accident. It is the result of relentless, highly orchestrated strategy. When a specific feeling or an assumption of quality just pops into your head when you hear a company name, you're experiencing the direct output of a really complex psychological mechanism. And today, we're going to unpack the gears of that exact mechanism.
All right, so we're starting at absolute square one here, looking closely at the core introductory module of strategic marketing. This is the crucial framework where the true purpose of marketing is actually defined and operationalized for anyone working at a high level.
And right at the heart of this framework is corporate positioning. Officially, it's defined as an effort to influence consumer perception of a brand or product. Now, I really want to zero in on one specific word here, effort, because this is not a passive exercise, okay? It is a highly deliberate, aggressively calculated campaign. Just think about the sheer orchestration behind a major product launch. Every single little touch point, the pricing elasticity, the specific matte finish on a box, the precise demographic they target in the PR rollout, it's all mathematically calculated. These companies are actively architecting the lens through which you view them. Take Apple, for example. Their effort isn't just about selling you a smartphone, it's this obsessive multi-billion-dollar effort to position themselves right at the intersection of premium technology and lifestyle. Literally every minimalist store layout and font choice is part of that relentless effort to shape your perception, way before you ever even hold the device.
But this brings us to a really crucial structural question. It's one that exposes the vulnerability of almost any marketing strategy. Influence relative to what, right? Because perception doesn't just happen in a vacuum. A brand can't just drop out of the sky into a market, declare, hey, we're the premium choice, and expect that narrative to magically stick without any context. The market is an incredibly dense, incredibly noisy environment. So any deliberate effort to influence a consumer's mind is, inherently, an act of pushing back against forces that are already established. A value proposition is basically meaningless without a denominator, and in this chaotic environment, that denominator is always the competition.
And this brilliantly illustrates how corporate positioning is always a measure of your brand or product weighed directly against the consumer's understanding of competing brands. If a strategist wants their product to be seen as the luxurious high-end option, well, that relies entirely on the consumer already having a really firm mental grasp of what the cheap, everyday options look like. Your perception is 100% relative. Let's look at the classic case study of 7-Up. For years and years, they completely struggled to compete directly with Coca-Cola and Pepsi on their own terms. It actually wasn't until they specifically positioned themselves as the un-cola that they finally unlocked massive market share. See, they didn't just define what they were, they defined themselves in direct opposition to the consumer's understanding of those dominant brands. They basically took the massive mental weight of Coke and Pepsi and strategically used it to position themselves as the definitive alternative. And that is the reality of the market. You are always being measured against the competition inside the consumer's mind.
Which leads to a realization that totally changes the paradigm of where business is actually done. Because the true battlefield, it isn't the grocery store aisle, it's not the digital storefront on your phone, and it definitely isn't the global supply chain. The definitive battlefield is the consumer's mind, period. That is quite literally the only place where the strategic fight for corporate positioning is actually won or lost. Human cognition is naturally limited, right? So to avoid completely overloading our brains, we instinctively categorize information and brands into these mental ladders. And brands are engaged in this brutal, unyielding warfare just to secure a favorable rung on that specific mental ladder inside your head. Honestly, if you aren't on that ladder, you essentially don't exist in that market.
So what's the ultimate goal here?
The absolute objective for anyone participating in this arena is to occupy a clear, unique, and advantageous position in the consumer's mind. And I really want to heavily emphasize the gravity of the word occupy here. You don't just visit the consumer's mind. You don't just rent some temporary space with a flashy viral marketing stunt. No, you have to claim that territory, fortify it, and hold it against relentless siege from your competitors. Think about the sheer strategic cost of occupying space. When Volvo claimed the concept of safety in the automotive industry, they didn't just run a couple of clever ad campaigns. They spent decades engineering their cars differently. They innovated the three-point seatbelt, and they aligned their entire corporate identity to defend that one single specific word in the consumer's mind. Actually occupying a position takes a massive sustained expenditure of resources and just ruthless consistency. But man, once you successfully plant your flag in that conceptual territory, it becomes this incredibly lucrative, highly defensible fortress.
So the crucial point is, to actually succeed in building that fortress, the position of brand claims has to hit 3 strict criteria. It's got to be clear, unique, and advantageous. And if you fail even one of these, it invariably leads to strategic collapse. Let's break down exactly why. First, the position must be clear. If a brand's message is muddy, or if it tries to be everything to everyone, it just totally fails to register on that mental ladder we talked about. Second, it has to be unique. If a product is clear and advantageous, but it's identical to an existing competitor, well, it just becomes a commodity, and that forces a brutal race to the bottom on price. And third, it absolutely must be advantageous. It has to offer a perceived benefit that actually solves a real problem or fulfills a distinct desire. I mean, if a brand creates a product that is perfectly clear and entirely unique, but nobody actually needs it, it's just a bizarre novelty destined to fail. These aren't just nice suggestions or industry buzzwords. These exact 3 adjectives are the mandatory load-bearing pillars for anyone looking to successfully engineer a brand's position in today's market.
So, what position do competing brands currently occupy in your mind? I want to leave you with this provocative thought to chew on long after this explainer wraps up. The next time you make an automatic purchase, whether you're just grabbing your go-to coffee or finally upgrading your software, stop for a second and run a quick mental audit. Why did you reach for that specific item? How did that company successfully navigate all the noise, plant their flag, and occupy that clear, unique, and advantageous spot right there in your head? Recognizing these invisible forces, it fundamentally changes how you view the whole world of business and really the subtle architecture of your own daily choices. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive into strategic marketing. And hey, keep analyzing those brilliant strategies shaping the perceptions all around you.